woke issues when it comes to corporations. Traditionally, we've thought of Republicans as being more or less aligned with big business, but I'm not sure that's true anymore. To give us his perspective, welcome now political strategist Zach Moffatt, CEO of Target Victory. Mr. Moffatt served as digital director for Mitt Romney's presidential campaign. So thank you so much, Zach, for being with us. So give us your take. Is there a fundamental shift going on in the relationship between the Republican Party and at least big business?
I think that's exactly right. And it's not a judgment call. It's just capturing the new reality that it's shifting in real time, that new alliances that are being made. And the traditional framework, which I think we've all worked under for the past couple of decades, is being reevaluated. And so for CEOs and C-suites, they have to think about what implications that means for them going forward.
Is this attributable, in your judgment, to Donald Trump, the former president? Did he trigger this, or was this something that was developing even apart from before Donald Trump came on the scene?
I think before, because I think Donald Trump is probably more of a manifestation of things that were going on under the surface. And so I think that he's kind of a culmination, but I think that there's been this break coming. And I think for a while, there's been a break between the C-suite and the employees within a company. That I think we've seen that time and again. You saw that with a lot of issues that come into DC, that maybe the people who are actually making up the employee base of a company didn't always see eye to eye with the C-suite and what they were thinking about with some of the investments offshore and others. But now you're seeing it come at a far more kind of a finer tip than previously.
In the meantime, you've got some state governments weighing in as well on both sides of the issue, I must say, when it comes to things like ESG, environmental, social, and governance. You see some for, some against. So what does a CEO do in that circumstance?
Well, I think that the challenge is that a CEO has to know what their vision is, and the companies and the board has to be aligned. I think too often what we see is a knee-jerk reaction, that there's something in a Twitter headline or someone sees that you've seen, with a limited kind of input, and they make a knee-jerk reaction, and suddenly the next thing you know, they're in the center of a storm. And what we're telling our clients, and we're saying to them, we have to be very thoughtful, just like any other business decision. You have to understand, where do you stand? What are you looking to achieve? I mean, two of the brands that consistently rank highest are Patagonia and Chick-fil-A, both with very distinct worldviews, but a consistent application of that worldview, which I think lets them rise above.
Well, that is a notable distinction. I do see the contrast between the two. But let's take a hypothetical client that you have, and let's assume that, in fact, some of the members of the House follow through on what they've said, and they have a hearing about things like disclosure of ESG, the extent to which they take into account. You're going to have Democrats and Republicans who are asking the questions, and they're going to come from exactly opposite positions. So what does a CEO do when they're called in and sworn to testify in front of one of those committees?
Well, I think the challenge is for a lot of these CEOs, by the time they get to the committee hearing, the body of work over the past couple of years is what they will also be answering for. I mean, we saw this with Senator Cotton the other day saying, don't look to me. You created this situation, and this is what we have to talk through. And I think that's what we tell people is you have to be really thoughtful. I think far too often people have stepped in with a very limited understanding of legislation and come out very, very aggressively with a point of view to then be found out that they were incorrect. And in the meantime, had kind of destroyed a traditional relationship that they had previously. And I think we're just seeing that kind of play out. And as I say, it's a shifting dynamic that we're seeing in real time, but still has a lot way to go.
What does this mean for politics going forward if we do have not a divorce, but at least sort of a distancing of the Republican Party overall from big business? What does that mean for future elections? What does it mean for donations, for that matter?
Well, I think you're right. From a donations to the top, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting dynamic of what it looks like when the employee base behaves differently than the C-suite. But I think we've also seen a shift in real time in politics that really we're at that phase where bottom-up politics is more powerful than top-down, right? We've seen whether it's Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, others are able to actually generate a majority of their donations from the bottom up. So the volume is there as long as you have the appropriate message. So I think, the donations is one part of it. I think the next is understanding, what do companies want to do and how political do they want to be? I think for a long time, they got a free pass by thinking they were hyper political and giving advice to get involved, and then suddenly realized there's a tax you pay when you're in the system and they have no interest in it. But by then it's too late. They've already kind of put their hand up and made a very declarative statement. And as such, they're dealing with the ramifications for years to come.
Knowing the Republican Party as you do, can you envision a time when it comes back again? That is to say, there's something of a, shall I say, tussle going on with the Republican Party right now about their relationship with Donald Trump. We knew what it was before. I'm not sure we know fully what it is right now. There are some in the party who are clearly distancing themselves from the former president. If that comes out that Donald Trump is no longer the effective leader of the party that he has been in a very powerful way, could that change the orientation of the Republican Party toward big business?
Well, I think for sure, but I mean, look at other standard bearers. I mean, Governor DeSantis has also had his run-ins with Disney and others because he feels like they overreached. And I think that there's different ways this manifests and plays out. I think Donald Trump is one part of it, but I think it's a larger conversation that companies to have because there's a change afoot. And the question is, how do you want to engage and what does it look like? I think for a long time, people were very comfortable taking their learnings and their indications out of Twitter. And what they're realizing is that's a really dangerous place because it's really this vocal 3% that's almost polling people. And what most people don't realize in the corporate space is they don't particularly care with you when they move on and they don't come back to protect you. And then these corporations are stuck in the middle, having gone too far out on the ledge and yet have no one behind them for support. And so I think that's what we're seeing is also a realization in the corporate sector that perhaps what they thought was a good move has to be really, really considered at the board level.
One quick one at the end. Is Twitter going to have the same effect in future elections that it has in the past?
Well, I think it always has a disproportional effect because a lot of the reporters in the elite are on there. And so it's almost a self-perfecting loop. Many of the things originate from there. It's in one hand, it's the tip of the communication spear. It's also the tip of the disconnect from everyday people. And I think that's what they're dealing with now is that look at how quickly, when it's flipped, how the same exact impact by each side is being yelled at 6 months later. And so I think we're seeing that kind of struggle in real time occurring on Twitter.
Those journalists are on there until they get kicked off. Thank you so much to political strategist Zach Moffatt. He is CEO of Target Victory. And this is Balance of Power. We are on Bloomberg Radio.